Yeah, this installment of the Campus Beat takes us from the Art Institute of Chicago all the way west to UCLA. The Art Institute. You know, there's university there. The school at the Chicago Art Institute, yeah?
Yep.
Uh,
Expensive to go there.
yeah, it
Whew.
is.
It's like, what, 80,000, I think?
It's free to, well, it's unpaid to be a docent there at the Art Institute, you know, to shepherd people around and explain the various exhibits. But there's a problem with the docents at the Art Institute. You know what it is. Too white.
Oh.
So the Art Institute fired all the docents and is reimagining their docent program at the Institute. They will be replaced by a limited number of paid educators who are less experienced and knowledgeable part-timers who will receive $25 an hour. The current 82 volunteer docents could reapply to be among the much fewer volunteer educators who will be chosen on the basis of an income equity focused lens,
Oh, no.
quote unquote. Yeah. Right? So what the Art Institute figured out is that those white women who largely comprise the docents at the Art Institute, their ability to work for free was emblematic of their privilege. So they had to be gotten rid of. Oh, sure, you have the free time to be an unpaid volunteer at the Art Institute. That speaks to your privilege, and you're crowding out people who don't know anything about art necessarily, but have a higher intersectional score. We should pay them. They can't work at the Art Institute because they don't have the free time. Maybe their husband or wife doesn't pull down a big enough income to allow them to pursue their interests and hobbies like art and being a volunteer docent. Well, we'll fix that. We'll pay $25 an hour, which is not chump change, by the way.
Oh, that's a good money.
We'll fire all the volunteers. Firing volunteers,
They're volunteering.
It almost sounds like they're the Republican Party. That's the only other place I know where volunteers get fired. Actually, most fire themselves. I'm talking about in Illinois. But yeah, fire the volunteers and bring in people that are, more akin to a Benetton ad so that we can make sure that we're improving our DIE score, diversity, inclusion, equity. Of course, you know the acronyms. What do you think about that?
312. Oh, excuse me. Voice change. 312-642-5600.
I don't like to go to the Art Institute and be smarter than the docent. Know more about art than the docent. But that's me. Maybe that'd be a self-esteem boost for some people that are actually art lovers who know more than those squiring people around to appreciate the exhibits. This is interesting, too. The Chicago Tribune editorial board.
Mm-hmm.
That new Marxist bunch there. Shame on the Art Institute for summarily canning its volunteer docents. They opined on this. Yeah. Calling the letter sent out by Veronica Stein, the Women's Board Executive Director of Learning and Engagement at the Art Institute. That's not an Orwellian title. A Weasley letter that she sent out at the beginning of September. The recipients were the museum's 150 or so volunteer docents, a beloved mainstay of the venerable cultural institution for decades, and the main providers of fine learned tours to Chicagoans and so forth. Well, that's true. I agree with that. Once you cut through the blather, the letter basically said the museum had looked critically at its core of docents, dominated mostly by white retired women with some time to spare, and found them wanting as a demographic. No matter their training, no matter their length of service, no matter their knowledge of the art at the Art Institute. Nope. That is all subordinate to race. You know what's funny about this? The Tribune getting all high and mighty about this. Of course, the Tribune editorial board is nothing but identitarians who support the idea that your intersectional score should govern. That's the most important thing. But apparently when it comes to the Art Institute and probably firing some of their friends, because the Art Institute and these retired white women are going to be in the more elite circles, probably have some friends on the Chicago Tribune editorial board. So now they're aghast because it's not for our friends, it's for everybody else. I mean, what do you think the political makeup of the docent core at the Art Institute is? Trump voters? No. You can't fire white liberal women who are our friends, writes the Tribune editorial board. Let me cut through their blather and just tell you what they're writing. There's no principle here. It's all, of course, it's Chicago. There's never any principle. It's just leave my people alone. This is my cohort of friends, and we're good people, and we're, all on board with the intersectionality and the counting by race and all of that, so why should we suffer? They like doing it, so just leave them alone.
But they educate the public about their art collection. They have a purpose. How do you get fired from a volunteer job?
The hypocrisy
I mean,
of
my God.
the hypocrisy of the Chicago Tribune and the insanity of counting by race. Another manifestation of it. Yet another manifestation of it, UCLA. The story of Gordon Klein.
Oh, this is a doozy.
He was suspended from his job for refusing to treat black students as lesser than their non-black peers. He's taught at UCLA's Anderson School of Management for 40 years, 15 different courses, finance, accounting, and law. Last June, he was asked by a black student to make the final exam no harm. All it could do is improve your grade. Like the real world. We are writing to express our tremendous concern about the impact this final exam and project will have on the mental and physical health of our black communities. And he goes on to talk about the unjust murders of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, so on and so forth. The Karen in the park in New York has led to fear and anxiety. We can't concentrate on our studies, and so on and so forth. Yeah.
We all have problems.
Gordon Klein responded, no. He said, I collected my thoughts and emailed back. Are there any students that may be of mixed parentage, such as half black, half Asian? What do you suggest I do with respect to them? A full concession or half? Do you have any idea if any students are from Minneapolis? I assume they're probably especially devastated as well. I'm thinking that a white student from there might possibly be even more devastated by this, especially because some might think that they're racist even if they're not. And then he, referenced King and his vision, his dream of a colorblind society. So that was a long way of saying, no, we're going to just treat everybody the same. By the evening of that response, students were calling for his job. They circulated a petition demanding he be fired. A couple of days later, 20,000 people had signed the petition, of course, without knowing about him or the particulars of the event. What does that matter? Then death threats. Then he gets suspended. Then the administration at the Anderson School of Management, UCLA, starts attacking his character on social media. This is the full-on mob, the full-on Star Chamber treatment. Less than 3 weeks after the whole thing blew up, though, he was reinstated, but the story's not over. He lost a significant amount of income because his income comes from not teaching at UCLA, but consulting to law firms and other corporations. And when this controversy became public, a lot of those law firms and other corporations dropped him as a consultant. He concludes this piece he wrote recently, posted to Barry Weiss's Substack, about this whole incident over the last 12 months. Well, 16 months. My parting thought, this isn't just about principle, his suing now UCLA.
Yes.
It's also about the United States' ability to compete. Anderson, like elite business schools across the country, is supposed to be training the next generation of innovators, the people who will muster the imagination and fortitude to create life-changing technologies. If we don't maintain our standards, we will be disarming unilaterally. I refuse to do that, and I'm convinced, this recent episode notwithstanding, most of my students and colleagues feel that way. Do they? I don't know. I mean, most of his students and colleagues may feel that way, but that will not necessarily win the day. I mean, how many times do we have to see this repeated in the annals of history? The committed few, and oftentimes the committed few that has malicious ends, defeating the common sense oriented majority. And that's exactly what's been happening on college campuses and in our culture generally for basically the last 100 years. It's been pedal to the metal the last 50, and it's been breaking the sound barrier in the last 5.
Yeah. I mean, Klein is allegedly, in the lawsuit, breach of contract and other claims, suing the school for unspecified damages, not only to redress the wrong conduct he's endured, but also to protect academic freedom. So he should be celebrated in all of this. And instead, he's been victimized by a university he's taught at for years.
This is something that the Art Institute, as well as the Anderson School of Management, UCLA, may want to pay attention to, and someone that more people should pay attention to. We've had him on the show many times. He's become a friend, Bob Woodson, from the Woodson Center in D.C. He's also the founder of the 1776 Unites Project to push back against the attempt to rewrite American history by the 1619 Project in the New York Times and the Pulitzer Foundation and basically the entire D.C. press corps and all these other institutions we talk about routinely. Bob Woodson, from an interview in 1989, so 3 decades ago, Bob Woodson talking about the black neighborhood where he grew up in South Philly in the 1950s.
I grew up in South Philadelphia. We didn't realize it was segregated. All we knew is that our neighborhood was all black, and we weren't even that conscious of color because the people who owned the store down the street were black, the tailor, the restaurant owners, the undertaker, everybody in the neighborhood, and it was a very small street. Everybody worked, blue collar, essentially. Very close-knit neighborhood. Everyone had over 4 children. We played in the streets together. On Saturday morning, our parents came out and the hucksters came around and our parents purchased things. We had to go buy ice because there were no refrigerators then. We had a coal stove, so the younger kids were responsible for putting wood and coal into the stove and keeping it going. And the level of interest in education was just profound. I mean, even to this day, I don't think I've ever had such a positive educational experience than I did in my first 6 years, because school was an integral part of the community. We had a black superintendent, a black principal, all the teachers were black. Many of them didn't live in the neighborhood either. Contrary to popular belief, they were middle-income people who lived elsewhere. But their hearts and their souls were into those kids. I remember that 3rd grade and 4th grade plays were always conducted in the evenings so that parents could attend. And an auditorium that seated maybe 400, 500 people was standing room only for a 3rd and 4th grade play. Up until 1959, 78% of all black families had a man and a woman in them. That's a fact. Teen pregnancy was looked down upon. Sexual activity among kids, everyone bragged about it. No one did it.
I want to hear more. That is amazing.
He's an amazing guy, and it's remarkable. So this is why he says, I long for the days of just confronting the overt racist, because these white leftist do-gooders who do everything out of a sort of a white man's burden perspective, who are going to eliminate racism and provide opportunity for me and for the black community, they're devastating me and the black community. And so this is nothing to excuse Jim Crow and the institutional racism of that era, and obviously Bob Woodson, who was a civil rights leader, doesn't. It's to focus on the cultural norms that made for successful families and successful people in spite of that.
The discipline was in the community. I mean, you didn't speak back to an adult. The thought of an elderly person being disrespected was just unheard of. And teachers were never disrespected. And if you misbehaved, you would be spanked by a neighbor. And your mother got home or father got home, you were spanked there. And God forbid a teacher should ever have to send for your parents. And they had to take off work. That was it. And so it imposed a kind of discipline. And again, it was a discipline that had little to do with how much money you made. There was a sense of comfort, a sense of well-being, a sense of oneness between the school and the community.
And now where are we 60 years later? Where are we not just in particular neighborhoods, in all these institutions? The cultural institutions that purport to perpetuate our heritage. The Art Institute, UCLA, the dozens upon dozens of schools at every level that we've poured over during the last 7 years we've been on the air. Where are we today as compared to where Bob Woodson was in South Philly in 1960?
We're not in that place.
Isn't it remarkable?
Yeah, it is.
And what's the lesson to take away from them, that tight-knit community? Could you imagine the trust in your neighbor that if my kid's misbehaving, you whap him on the ass, and I back that guy. I back my neighbor. I know Joe down the block.
Oh, yeah.
If you did something wrong and Joe felt it was right to whap you on the ass, then I know Joe was right. And now, you're going to get a 2X when you get home. And if it involves, as you said, a senior citizen or a teacher, 3X. If I have to be called from work, 5X.
Back when there was discipline, when you had consequences for your actions, which doesn't exist anymore.
Cultural norms about responsibility rather than entitlement.
Coming up on... All right, coming up on Chicago's Morning Answer.
All right, the vaccine was a promise to return to normalcy. Is that possible? 606.
But now let's head into the newsroom to get news here at home and around the world. Here is Mike Scott. Good morning, Mike.
Dan and Amy, one in custody after shots are fired at Chicago police. A funeral today for a Chicago teen killed